Hello everyone, I'm Michael Polisek, and this is going to be a hot lap guide for the 2020 Season 3 Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 Club Sport in iRacing, and this is at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Before we begin the in-depth analysis of this hot lap, I'm going to be playing the full hot lap for you now in cockpit view with all my in-game pedals, wheel inputs, and everything else for you to see. Once we're done with that, then we will begin with the full hot lap where I will go through every corner step by step, and I will show you exactly what to do for every single corner. The time set here was a 123.207. However, further refinements to all the techniques that I will talk about in this video should bring it down to about a 22.9 or a 122.8. With that, we'll play the full hot lap now, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. So now that you've watched the hot lap in full, we're going to go through every single corner step by step. We're going to be starting out with turn 1. It's a relatively fast yet deceptive corner where you really need to apex very late for it. I normally apex at around the end of the curb here, and what you really need to do is just dab on the brakes a little bit, as you can see right here. Just a quick dab on the brakes to get the weight on the front tires at around the point where I start turning the wheel. I need to make sure I carry enough momentum so that the car can follow a natural arc through the corner while trying not to apex too early, which is really, really easy to do, which will spit you out onto the grass and normally instantly kill you. So you need to be mindful to apex late, and I apex at the end of the curb around here. Now notice how I'm on the power before the apex. Like immediately as I'm off the brakes, I coast for a little bit, and then I get on the power right here on this bit of track right here. And as I said before in my quick hot lap analysis, I get on the power pretty much as soon as possible. I had to lift a little bit of a breather of the throttle to make sure that the rears didn't completely slide out from underneath me. But you'll notice that the rear end will slip out from underneath you a little bit. You'll hear the tires scrabbling for traction a little bit. Don't worry about that. That's normal and natural, and that's pretty much par for the course. And pretty much as long as you keep the car underneath you, you should be fine. Now bear in mind, later in the run, when the rears start going off, that will be more of an issue, and you may need to lift a little bit more. So be mindful of that. So we're going to take you through this corner at full speed first, and then we'll go through it in slow motion. as you can see, I was full on the power pretty much as soon as I hit the apex. So now we're going to go through it at half speed, and we'll show you the wheel and pedal inputs here. So as you can see, I'm hard on the power now after the apex, and I keep the steering wheel as straight as possible to minimize sliding. And the rear end was still sliding quite a bit through there, but the car really wasn't losing any speed or any time to really be worth considering an issue right now. Again, as I said before, once the tires start overheating, which they will after a few laps, you'll have to be a lot more mindful of how much power you're giving it through the corner. Now we're going to be going into turn 2. This is probably one of the most difficult corners on the entire circuit. So I'll play through this first in full speed. It's a double apex corner. You can kind of see the 2 apexes that I'm trying to hit. And this is an extremely difficult corner. Because this car's ABS system reacts pretty violently to any major braking input, or really any braking input at all, and that pretty much takes away any sort of ability to brake turn the car, you'll need to make sure that you're very light on the brakes through this corner. So we're going to talk about the line first. As per usual, you should really start on pretty much the extreme right edge of the track. Get the car braked, get the car turned in, so you pretty much just use the brakes, not so much to slow the car down, but just to kind of tip the car into the corner. Now, the first apex here, you can see this little indent of the grass here. This is an apex you want to clip. You don't want to clip it too hard because there's this grass bank here, and if you hit this, then the car will bounce pretty violently. This car's been known to have pretty bouncy suspension, and if you hit this on the first lap, you're most likely spinning and wrecking your car. So don't do that. Instead, do what I do and keep a relatively safe distance away from the edge here. Coast a little bit, and then once you're ready that the car can make it around the corner safely, then get hard on the power. So now the rear end will slip out a little bit through here. It's not major, but you can use this to your advantage by kind of allowing the throttle to steer the car around in a controlled oversteer, which is what I'm doing here. And I keep hard on the throttle. You want to make sure you don't give it too much turn in here at the second apex, because the track kind of cambers a little bit inwards, so you can take advantage of the positive camber to carry more corner speed. But if you give it too much steering input, the rear end's going to slide out on you. That's going to kill your rear tire temp and a lot of time. And pretty much use all the track here if you absolutely need to. Bear in mind, again, later in the stint, when the rear tires start overheating, you need to be a lot more careful in terms of how much you apply the power, because eventually the car will just pendulum over. And when you try and set up for this corner here, the back end can just randomly snap on you and instantly kill you. So in the race, take it a bit easier, and you might want to use a less aggressive setup. So maybe lower rear ride height or softer anti-roll bars or anything like that. Now, one thing I would like to point out is that I did make a mistake of throttle braking here. This is something you absolutely need to avoid because it just wastes fuel, time, and efficiency. So I should have been a lot more off the throttle here to make sure that I get the maximum braking point possible, because I'm just slowing myself down by keeping the throttle and brakes up at the same time. So as you can see, the rear end of the car nicely squats through here, and we make it around the corner relatively safely. Again, I'm going to be playing this in cockpit view here, just to show you my inputs, and we'll continue on to the next corner. And we will do this once again in slow motion. We'll be starting at the exit of turn 1. So once again, nicely on the brakes, ease it into the corner. And give it full throttle, hard on the power. Make sure to minimize your steering inputs through here. You can see the traction control lights light up purple here. That shows that I got a little bit of rear slip and lost a little bit of time. I think that covers turn 2 pretty well. We're now going to move on to turn 3. Turn 3 is like turn 1, deceptively challenging, as with most of the corners on this track. This track is probably one of the simplest, if not the simplest track on the PCA Season 5 calendar. However, it is deceptively challenging to put in a very fast lap around here because you have to drive the car right on the edge every single lap, and this track does not forgive mistakes easily. So, with turn 3, what I normally do is I try and trail brake the car all the way to the apex, or most of the way there. Then I pick up the throttle at the earliest opportunity and give it full throttle. I treat this part of the tarmac here, the outer edge here, as sort of runoff, as I try to minimize my steering angle to get on the power as early as possible, and I'll just take the extra distance penalty. It is a lot faster than trying to keep the car to the inside and having the rear end step out on you and having to correct that. So, one thing, again, you got to watch out for is throttle braking right here. That is extremely bad, and that's something I'm very guilty of in this car, just because you're doing so much at the same time, because these cars are not easy to drive. What people tell you, even if it is a GT4 car, this car is extremely difficult to survive a race in, let alone go fast in. Again, this is the 2020 Season 3 build of the car. If iRacing decide to update this in the next coming days or so, if you are watching this before the 2020 Season 4 update, then a lot of this will not be relevant. The basic lines and stuff may remain the same, but a lot of the techniques and setups used to go fast will be probably extremely different. Anyway, we're going to be going through this corner now. So, again, keep your foot on the brakes. Try and brake as light as possible to minimize the amount of ABS kicking in. Then once you feel like you got the car slowed down enough, you can coast to keep the weight on the front tires, and then get on the power as smoothly and as soon as you can. If you get it right, the car will pretty much shoot right out of here, and make sure to use as little steering angle as possible. If you use too much, the car will want to slide, and you're going to lose a huge amount of time. And in worst case scenario, especially first lap, if you are way too aggressive with the throttle, you will spin and die. And that's not good. So don't do that. Try and be careful the first time out and slowly work up your confidence. Especially race lap 1, you want to be extremely careful on the throttle through here, because the back end will want to become the front end, and vice versa. So don't do that. And make sure to use all the track width possible through here. I give it quite a considerable amount of steering lock going through the mid-corner phase right here, just so that I can get the car turned in, and the car will bite really nicely if you get up close to this curb, as with most of the curbs around here. So make sure you get the car turned in, get the corner over with as early as possible, and then pretty much boot it at the nearest available opportunity. Again, minimum steering lock coming out, otherwise you will find yourself with a world of pain. If you get it wrong, again, you're going to slide. So once again, we are going to be going over this corner. We'll be playing it in full speed in cockpit view now. And now we're going to be playing this in reverse. We're going to be playing this in slow-mo. And we will be doing this from the exit of turn 2. So as you can see, hard on the power, shift over as soon as you can, as soon as it feels safe to, then get on the brakes relatively hard, then trail brake to get the car turned in, coast a little bit, and then get on the power as soon as you can, like right here once the car has stabilized. Don't get on the power too early, otherwise you're going to spin. Use pretty much all the tarmac that you need to and nothing more. And then you're good to go. And make sure that you shift the car over to the right side of the track to prepare for turn 4, which is considerably difficult, even if it's just a left-hand corner as you're about to see. So going into the Continental Bridge, I start the turn relatively early to try and aim for this quote-unquote curve right here. Now, this section of track's pretty weird just because it all depends on the bounces you get. Some bounces will be good bounces and will want to drag you over to the inside portion of the track here to set you up really nicely for Moss Corner, which is this hairpin. Other times, you'll get really bad bounces, which will deposit you like right here and will pretty much ruin your lap and your race. So what I normally try and do is I try to stick so that the left side tires are relatively close to these grass patches here. You don't want to hit them because then I think that will ping your car over here, which will be bad. You want to get as close to them as possible without actually hitting them. It's a fine line and it's pretty risky, but if you want to be the fastest around here, you will need to do this every single lap. So pretty much the only thing I can say is practice and then hope that iRacing suspension RNG does its thing. And cross your fingers and hope that you don't die. That's all I can say. Now, the other thing you need to worry about here is because this car does not have a lot of grip, you cannot take this section flat out. And that requires either proper throttle modulation or brake modulation if you need to. So as you can see here, I'm getting off the throttle early on to shift the weight over to the front end. And I'm modulating it relatively nicely to make sure to carry the speed through the corner. So as you can see, I'm even giving it a little bit of dab of the brakes here, just to make sure that the car is correctly positioned. I'm still carrying speed, and I have enough grip on the front tires to make the car turned in. And this will set us up really nicely for Moss Corner, which is not the most difficult corner on the track. It's difficult, yes, and it's also pretty inconsistent, but there is one corner that is more difficult, in my opinion, than Moss Corner. So we're going to be taking a look at this from cockpit view. I will stop this during the second time through, just so that you can get a reference of what to exactly look for. So we're going to be heading into Moss Corner now. Right here, you see the left side of the car starting to dip, and you can kind of see there's almost like one of the gutters. It's almost like a gutter that you might see in on some Japanese toge tracks. Something Japanese anime, something 86, something, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, you want to basically do the gutter run and pretty much stay to the left-hand side of this divot here, and you want to ride this all the way out to the entry for Moss Corner. So let's see how it's done in slow motion. So you can see I kept it pretty well in the gutter. I just need to make sure that the car is set up for this corner here. It doesn't really matter how you get the car set up here as long as you carry sufficient speed and a good line through here. Anyway, we are going to be going into Moss Corner, and this corner here is tricky difficult, annoying, and pretty satisfying if you get it right. If you get it right. So this corner is weird because it's uphill. And that means you can brake extra late for it. Despite it being a hairpin, you can take quite a bit of speed going through it, and gravity will be your friend here. So as you can see here, again, throttle braking. Don't do this. That's bad. It's very bad. And you need to be especially mindful of this because this kills lap time, and this adds on pointless tenths that you don't need. So pretty much stay on the brakes as hard as you can. Well, not as hard as you can, just hard enough so the ABS annoys you the least. I'm using a pretty aggressive ABS setting. I'm using ABS 7. And the reason why I did this is because it's a good compromise between sacrificing a bit of corner entry turn-in for the stronger traction control and ESC that you get, because in the 2020 Season 3 build of the car, iRacing has still not allowed you to separately control the ABS, TC, and ESC of the car for whatever reason. So I'm pretty much still hard on the brakes through here. I keep trail braking through here. As you can see, I'm actually getting a little bit of a rear right wheel lift. Let's actually focus on that. So you can see it kind of leaving the track a little bit here. Don't worry about that. You might actually feel that, and the rear end starting to let go, but don't worry about that. Pretty much, if that happens, just get off the brakes and keep trail braking a bit to keep the weight on the front tires. Then once you have the car turned in, you might have understeer lock here. In this case, just don't worry about it. Just coast or trail brake a little bit more so that you don't completely miss the corner. And then once you feel that the car is slowed down enough, then get on the power as hard and as smooth as you can. The car's got a lot of traction here if you get everything right and you're not overstressing the tire. Think of the traction circle. You can only use 100% of braking, acceleration, or cornering at the same time, or compromise of those two. So make sure you're riding the edge of the traction circle as much as possible. So as you can see here, pretty much the car's been basically settled down. So I get on the power as hard as the tires will go here. So I'm not on full power yet because I'm still using a bit for cornering. And then I'm on full power and then straightening the wheel pretty much as soon as possible. Anyway, we will now be moving on to the back straight here. Actually, before we move on to the back straight, we are going to play through all of that again in slow motion. So we're going to be taking a look at this in cockpit view at regular speed first, and then we will be taking a look in slow motion again. And one more note. This runoff here, it is a little bit slower to go here, but use it if necessary. If you carried so much speed and your trajectory is off so that you have to use this, then do so. It might not cost any time, but in general, you may want to avoid this just because the bump here might unsettle the car and cost you like a few hundredths or something. It's nothing too major. It's just something to consider. Maybe somebody could find a line there that regularly uses that will be faster, but in my experience, it's a little slower. So now we're going to be taking a look in cockpit view. And I will be making one correction to an earlier corner that we have covered of what not to do. So here we are, approaching the corner now, using that gutter there to get us set up for this corner. Again, hard on the brakes here. You can see the right rear wheel lifting up a little bit. Then after trail braking, get hard on the power after the big curve. Use the runoff if needed. And now you're home free out of the corner and onto the back straight. So we're going to be going back to turn 2, and I'm going to give one word of warning. Make sure you brake early enough and start your turn in early enough through here. If you don't, then very bad things will happen. Mainly you completely missing this corner. If we're going to be going to a previous lap, I think this one does have a corner here as well. But point is, if you do not brake early enough or start your turn in early enough, you're going to sail past this apex here and run wide all the way through the corner, and you're never going to get back onto the apex for this apex here. You're going to keep running wide and going to have to lift, or you'll have a date with the tire barriers very, very soon. Anyway, back to the lap, and we're going to be going down the back straight. Pretty much nothing too special here. Just keep the car straight and narrow, minimum steering inputs. Stick it to the inside here. Don't go into the drainage ditch here. Yeah, the car will hook up a bit better, but it will cost a lot of time because the car's bouncing and not going forward. Again, probably the most challenging sector and probably the most nerve-wracking sector of the track. But this is probably the most fun sector in my opinion. So, braking hard into these next corners here. It's turn, I think, 6 and 7 or whatever. But these two long right-handers here are pretty intuitive. What you really need to do here is get on the brakes relatively early. Again, it's not that hard on the brakes. Pretty much you just want to tip the car in, and you want to aim to get as close to this curb as possible. And you want to aim for this first red stripe of the curb right here where my right-hand mirror is. So keep trail braking it all the way through up until the mid part of this first apex. Then for the second apex here, you can see that there is quite a divot between the tarmac. It kind of slopes inward like this, and the curb, which also slopes inward like this. This creates a pocket. And again, like the Continental Bridge turn, this is pretty much another gutter that you can use to pretty much ride all the way through this corner. As you can see here, I stayed a pretty good amount of time through that quote-unquote gutter to exit out. And that should set you up really nicely for the final two corners. So let's take a look at that in cockpit view. And once again, mind the throttle braking. This is not good. And we will view that once again in slow motion. Again, don't brake too hard, otherwise you'll activate the ABS and then the car will refuse to turn. You can also use a lot of the power on oversteer here. Carry a lot of power through here. You don't have to continue braking through here. You can keep on the power here just because, again, the quote-unquote gutter here will allow the car to turn in. In some cars, like the Audi RS3 LMS, this gutter here pretty much will make or break a quali lap. You want to stay in that as much as possible, and the car will just hook up all the way through it. And these two corners here, yes, they look like simple flowing 90-degree corners, but they are the toughest on this entire circuit. Many laps have been thrown here, and many races are won or lost here, either going side by side or somebody choking one of these corners and going off track or going offline. So we're going to be covering this corner first, turn 9, and we are going to be trail braking all the way to the apex. Again, you just want to tip the car in here and then get hard on the power. Well, not hard on the power, but you want to ease on the gas enough to the point where you can gain speed and also kind of swing the rear end around to get the car ready for turn 10. Don't go full throttle here. Well, actually, you can at the very end, but don't give it too much power. Otherwise, you're going to be over here, and you're going to have a really bad time going through the final corner here. So I guess we can't really talk about one corner without the other. So we're going to be talking about the final corner now. This is the most difficult corner on this entire track, bar none. It's incredibly difficult, incredibly infuriating, and extremely tough to get right and incredibly inconsistent, especially in a car as difficult to drive as this. So again, mind the throttle braking. Don't do that. That's not good. But relatively hard on the brakes, and trail brake all the way. Well, trail brake a little bit. Again, use the uphill here and the extra grip bonus this provides. And you want to get, again, as close to the curb as possible, because being close to these curbs will give you more grip, because I think there's like a little divot here that the tires will just sink into. Get as close to this curb as possible. Be on the power as early as you dare, and be smooth and unwind the steering as soon as possible so you can clip this exit curb really nicely. Use all the space available to get up to it. Now, again, a word of warning. If you give it too much brakes, the ABS will say, I don't like this. I don't like you using this much brake input, so I'm gonna give up all your turn in for no reason whatsoever. And the car will just go straight on with the front tires on fire, and you're gonna end up missing the apex and running like right about here. So you have to brake even harder, which is only gonna make the problem worse and make you lose even more speed. So for your first laps, just brake early, brake nice and early with not a lot of braking input. And just take your time through this corner, and 9 times out of 10 you'll be a lot faster than trying to hustle the car through. Now in a hot lap, you want to hustle the car through, but again, don't overdo it. Otherwise, you're going to fall into the trap that I just described, and many laps have been ruined by this corner. And again, be very careful with how much throttle input and steering input you use through this corner. If you use too much of either, the rear end will slip out on you, and that's goodbye lap and maybe goodbye race if you don't save it. So with that in mind, we're going to go back through turns 9 and 10, and we are going to play this out in cockpit view for you to see. Now, one final word of warning, don't hit this curb. For obvious reasons, because this car likes to pogo a lot, because it's extremely bouncy with the relatively broken suspension it has on it. And on cold tires, if you hit this curb, I think it will just kill you instantly, and there's nothing you can do about it. With this car, especially on first laps, be extremely careful of any bumps, because if the car pogos and you have any sort of steering input, or I guess any input at all, the car will usually just instantly kill you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So be mindful of that. Be careful. And again, this is using a relatively aggressive setup. Even though I'm using the ABS setting of 7, it's a pretty aggressive setup. So again, these lines and whatnot will change throughout your setups or your driving style. So these, again, take these lines with a pinch of salt, because they're not for everyone and they may not be to your driving style. So if you find something that's faster or more consistent or better, then use that. But hopefully this will cover some of the basic driving lines and techniques that you need to get around this track relatively quickly. So Before we close out, I'm going to play this once again in slow motion through coming out of the exit of the double apex into the final couple of corners. So again, light on the brakes, make sure you get the car turned in, get as close to that curb as possible. Throttle control through here so that the car is set up really nicely to go through the final corner here. Get on the power as soon as you dare. Straighten the steering. Use all of the exit curb as possible to the run to the line. And there you go. That is a lap of Mosport. I hope you found this lap and this video fairly entertaining. And we are going to play out the full lap again from cockpit view one more time so that you can use all the techniques used in this video. And one final word of warning for one of the corners we covered earlier in this video, turn 3, or at least what I think is turn 3. Be very careful not to overshoot this corner because it's very hard to judge when you need to brake and what apex you really need to hit. I don't really have any major landmarks for hitting any of these corners. I just try to hit the sharpest point of this corner here. But if you brake way too late, you'll find yourself in the weeds like right about here, and you're going to screw up your line and screw up your lap. So just be mindful of that. And with that, we are now going to conclude this video and just talk about the general track. So in conclusion, this track here is probably the simplest on the PCA Season 5 calendar. However, it is exceptionally difficult to get a very good lap around here. It's deceptively challenging, this track. And again, there's very little room for error with this car, this track, and especially when the rear tires start going off. That's when most of the issues during the race will happen. So you need to be fully on your guard the entire way around. And again, a setup for a 20-minute race may not be the setup for a 40-minute race. You may need to have a slightly more conservative setup or a slightly more conservative driving style. I hope this video was helpful and entertaining. If you found anything faster or have any questions or anything like that, please let me know either in the comments in this video or DM me on Discord or anywhere else. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.